Hey everyone, Naveed Jamali here, continuing with our series where you're going to get an inside look, not just on the military, but some of the influencers that make the military culture what it is. I'm really excited to bring our next guest on. She is an amazing person. She happens to also be aircrew, which is also super, super cool. We're going to get into that. So I hope you'll join me and welcome Heather. So let's get right into it. Hey, Heather. Thanks
Hey,
for coming on. This is great. So I'm first of all really excited that you could join us, and I want to start with some of the really basic stuff. Can you tell us on the military side what your job is and what you do?
yeah, I'm a UH60 Blackhawk crew chief, and my ancillary duty is the unit public affairs representative.
Which one is cooler, being a public public affairs officer or a crew chief?
Crew chief.
Crew chief.
Yeah.
you know, I think for a lot of people, they don't necessarily know what a crew chief is, right? So when you see a helicopter, a lot of times they have a crew of four, three or four. And besides the fact that crew chiefs love to wave at kids and people below, can you explain a little bit about what crew chiefs do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my responsibility as a medevac crew chief is the pre-flight inspection, post-flight inspection of the aircraft, preparing the aircraft for any medevac missions. And for our unit, I'm a reserve soldier, it's a lot of training missions. So we're constantly making sure that we are staying up to date with our flight hours and our currency, and hoist operations, because we have to hoist our medic into certain areas to be able to get to their patients. And the list goes on. There's a lot to it. And the best part of it is flying.
Before joining the Army, had you ever flown in a helicopter before?
I had flown as like a ride along for a police agency just to see what it was like. And that was the only time.
So it was like a pretty new thing for you, I'm guessing, like in that role.
It's extremely new. Yes.
Having flown in a few different airframes, I mean, the crew chief, I think it's like people focus on the pilots, but the crew chiefs are the ones that really make things happen. Can you explain, like, just what made you want to be aircrew?
You know, before enlisting, never in a million years imagined that it was something that I would be able to do. When I started my enlistment journey, I was looking at the different jobs and responsibilities that you could have in the Army. And I came to a crossroad. It was, I could either go into a job in the Army that was along the lines of what I do on the civilian side, or I could do something completely different and make it an adventure. And I chose to make it an adventure. And the best adventure to me was aviation. Like, what could I do with that? Researched a bunch of different videos, a bunch of different MOSs, jobs, and I came across crew chief, and that's what I wanted to do.
And I mean, have you been disappointed so far?
Not at all. Not at all.
What's it like flying in a Blackhawk?
Okay, so different than being in an airplane, right? The maneuvering capabilities, the hovering capabilities, just the different experiences that you can have in the Blackhawk, the places that you get to go. My unit is beautiful. We are located in a city called Los Alamitos. It's near Long Beach in California. And we fly all along the coast. So a lot of our training operations are at Camp Pendleton and in the LA mountains and just all these beautiful areas along the ocean. And the views that you get, especially if you get a sunset flight, it's incredible.
I mean, I have to agree with you. Having flown in a bunch of different aircraft, I really enjoy flying the rotary stuff just because you get to fly low, the doors are open. I mean, you get to really see the landscape. It's hard to, in my opinion, explain what the landscape looks like, 80 feet, 100 feet off the deck. Like, it's just a very different viewpoint as opposed to being a commercial airliner where you're just like looking down at the tiny trees, if you can even see
Absolutely.
them.
Yeah.
What a cool job. I mean, is there something that stands out specifically about your time flying or being in the Army?
I think just our mission. So we're a medevac unit. So our mission is medevac, and doing the training and having the experience of, training to go help somebody. So think of it as like an air ambulance. If somebody's in need or in danger, like we're going to be the ones that they call when we're on a training mission or if we get deployed. So just knowing that you're part of something that's in the long run going to be helping somebody is such an incredible feeling. And then just a crew camaraderie too. Like, sorry, I said that weird, camaraderie. Like it's just such an amazing thing.
You know, I totally get it. Like being around these, like, it's kind of wild to think that there's 4, maybe 8 of you if there's 2 aircraft, but the 4 or 8 of you are just going to take those 2 aircraft and you're kind of on your own. It's like a pretty awesome responsibility when you go do stuff, right? I mean, you're in charge of an important piece of equipment, but you kind of got to do your own thing, which I think is pretty cool too, especially when you're flying, right?
In what walk of life are you given that responsibility and trust, right, to handle this aircraft? And it's just, it's incredible.
That is. So I got to ask you. So like one of the things I've flown in Hueys, Chinooks, Blackhawks, 53s, and Seahawks, or the SH60C as the Navy call. They don't call them Seahawks. They get angry if I say that. But one thing I've always asked is, like, you know, who are the most Gucci pilots? Who are the most Gucci aircraft? And honestly, so I'll tell you, like, the Cobra, I love the Cobra. It's an amazing aircraft. I've talked to some Apache pilots and some funny stories with them too, but the Cobra is a really cool aircraft. And Cobra pilots are an interesting breed. Like, yeah, I won't get into it, but there are definitely some funny stories I have about them. They're very, very anal. And then when they fly, they're completely, like, they just let it hang out. But, and here's the part for you, you know, talking to some of your brethren in the other airframe communities, including the Blackhawk community, I've always asked, like, so who's like the most prima donna pilots? And they're like, definitely medevacs, definitely the Mike model pilots. And they say it obviously with a lot of respect because you have to go do your thing, but they're definitely, do you think that's true? What do you?
You know what? I can't agree with that. One, I love my crew and I love my pilots. And some of them are like the most hardworking. Like they come out and they'll jump on the aircraft and help with inspecting or help prepping the aircraft. And I can't always say that about some of my the other pilots I've come across.
Shots fired.
I'm not going to names, but no, we have a dynamite crew.
Yeah.
We've even done some cross country training to other states and worked with other companies and units, and we get a lot of accolades for our crew jumping in to assist each other because we just want to get the job done. So
yeah, no doubt. Look, it's always
not pilot to pilot. So
it's always fun to have other crews spill the tea about other airframe communities. It's always a funny thing. No, it's always done with a lot of respect. I don't mean that at all. And like, you know, but it is a very interesting thing that, you know, there's within these communities, there's a little healthy competition, right? I mean, a 100%. Little rivalry, but in a friendly way.
The aviation community within the Army is such a small community that at some point you're all going to cross paths. And there's definitely some competitiveness.
So. All right. So then why don't you spill the tea a little bit? As a medevac crew, who would you say is like the most challenging prima donna crew? Because obviously you do dissimilar flights. You fly with slicks and all that. What do you have to say?
I like to play nice in the sandbox. I can't do it. I love.
Oh, come on, let's cop out. You got to give us something.
Maybe the Apache.
I'll tell you about the Apaches. We were out in Vermont and with the Marines, and it was like the fall in Vermont. Weather changes like, you know, drop of a hat, and we had gosh, I forget what they're called, but they're basically the Marines. They work with the air crews to call in fires, and so 2 Apaches was to come in, and it was raining, so they wouldn't come in. And I got this great scene where we had like one of the guys on the radio, and I was like, so where are the Apaches? He's like, well, the weather. And we pan out. It was like a perfectly blue sky with not a cloud in the sky. And, you know, there was weather. There's no doubt. But it was this funny moment. And then of course the Hueys and the Cobras, the Marine Huey and Cobra came in. They gave zero fucks about.
So funny. Yeah.
But listen, the Apache is an amazing aircraft. Again, I've talked to plenty of Apache pilots. They're an interesting breed, and I know we're all fun, kind of joshing here. Have you ever flown with other branches, or has it just been Army?
I've only flown with the Army. So we've had different training experiences where I've gotten to meet pilots from other branches, and it's so cool. Like, I love meeting all the different branches, obviously, and seeing the different setups for the aircraft. And yeah.
Is there, I know you're partial to the mics, but before we get into the social media part of this, is there a particular aircraft that you're, besides the medevac model, that you're partial to?
I don't think I'm partial to, but I would love to be able to go to on the guard side and just check out the assault setup, and be able to do like the whole door gunner. Like, I would just love that experience just to have it, because it's so different than the medevac mission. So. Completely.
I flew in a Huey, Marine Huey, with their, they did live fire, and the percussion from the 50 cal, like, because it's pointed like outside, it creates like a pressure differential. And I'm sitting there and the window blows out, and the Marines, like, they're like, whatever. They just kept like, we landed, one of them had a bloody nose, and they're like, we don't care. Like, we're just going to go back and do this. It's a very different life, different style than other things, flying a 47 or others. Definitely pretty cool. But I got to say, being in a medevac, and like, I've seen how they fly, and they do. I mean, some of the most amazing airmanship I've ever seen was by a medevac pilot, and that's not even an exaggeration. Like, what he did with that Blackhawk was, we have a clip we'll show you later. It was simply, he stood it on its nose and just did a 360 around us, about 40 feet off the ground. It was amazing. And I mean, he was, I know he's hot dogging a little bit, but when he's talking about hoist operations and what they have to do to keep the aircraft steady, it requires like some superior airmanship. So I would say that some of the most like surgical focused flying I've ever seen has been with medevac pilots and medevac crew.
I'm amazed at their capabilities and the things that they can do in this aircraft. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, all right. So I want to switch gears to the other thing that you do, which is social media.
Yes.
So you're an interesting, right? So your day job is, you're in the public affairs world. Is that right?
I am. I'm a public information officer for a sheriff's agency, sheriff's office. And formerly I worked as a television journalist for a handful of years before I switched over to the military and to this field.
So, and you've done the sort of the handshake between being military and also really, being a very active social media influencer on the military side. I have some fun questions I want to ask you, but obviously the big thing is a lot of conversations I get to have with senior leadership in the military, and there's, especially with recruiting, with what's going on right now, the lackluster numbers, I would say. I think we're in this point where people like you really have the ability to speak to young people and to the next generation. And, I'm just curious, for a lot of people, senior leadership, they may not understand the power of social media, but what is it that you think that like military social media influencers can do in a positive way to sort of help the military, help recruiting? What is it? I feel like there's a missed opportunity by not using folks like you.
I think they're getting on board with it now, right? I think they were a little bit behind, and now they're seeing the benefits in it, because I do see it forging its way forward. But I think those influencers, and I don't even consider myself an influencer, honestly. I know people say that, but my biggest thing is sharing an experience. And I think that comes from a journalist perspective. Started as a journalist. You shared people's experiences. I shared my experience on my day-to-day life and stuff. And you really saw that boom with like TikTok and everything, when people started sharing a day in the life. And in the military, sharing those experiences show all these young kids, or even in my case, I was older when I enlisted, but showing those who might have an interest in enlisting what that experience truly is like. good, bad, ugly, all of it. But also showing them that they don't have to be afraid, because I think so many people are afraid to take that step into the unknown of what it is to enlist into the military. I think that's the biggest hang up for people, is they're so afraid of going to boot camp, of not knowing what to expect when they get off that bus, or even, getting to your first unit, not knowing what to expect. And as influencers, if we can show that, then it kind of takes away that fear a little bit, I think. So
I think that's a very astute observation. Man, we heard young people are like afraid of joining the military because they're afraid of dying. And it's, I was in the reserves too. I mean, listen, it's a dangerous job. I don't poke light of it, but that I think shows you the disconnect with what people think about the military versus the reality, right?
Well, it's a misconception. People think
so.
From the military that you're going to be boots on the ground, have your weapon, and that's going to be your job until you go off into something else. And what they don't realize is that you can enter the military into a job that you want, that I don't know, it's not always the boots on the ground. Like, look at me, it's aviation, right? A medevac unit. There's just so many different opportunities that I think these young kids don't know that. And as influencers, if we can show them there's so many different avenues that you can take, then let's do that.
All right, you ready for the last part and the fun part? Because I totally agree. And you talk about showing them, and that's obviously one of the things that we wanted to get you on, is I think you're doing a tremendous job of showing in a fun, positive way, what it's like to be in the military. So do a little part of the episode here. We're going to show you a bunch of clips. We haven't, as you can attest to, we haven't told you which clips we're going to show you. We're going to show them to you, and then get your live reaction. So
I'm excited.
I have no idea which one, so it'll be fun for us. So I'll let Crystal, our wonderful producer, cue this up, and whenever you're ready, Crystal, you can play those clips. Talk us through. What are we seeing here?
Okay, so it's my daughter, my son. That was when I came home after being away for training I hadn't seen them in 4 or 5 months. It was Mother's Day, and I surprised them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a great moment. And kids obviously super proud of what mom does, I'm guessing.
Super proud. You can tell they get a little anxious when I'm like, we had dinner last night. I'm getting ready to prepare for a training that's overseas this summer. Well, it's coming up in about 6 weeks. And I had to tell them, hey, mom's going to be gone for a little while. And you could see that anxiousness kind of come in, because they're like, like, she's leaving again. But then the conversation turns into like, they're proud. They love it. They want to know, like, okay, so what are you training? What's next? Where are you guys headed? They love knowing about my crew and everybody. And so they ask those questions, and it's just, they're so proud.
Very sweet.
So all the fun things you get to do as a crew chief. So not only are we going to operate the hoist, but until you know what it's like to experience riding the hoist, can you properly operate it? So they first ran, this is during my progression phase of becoming a crew chief. And I had to go on the hoist just like my medics would. And you get to experience that feeling of dangling from essentially this huge aircraft above you. And it's just such an incredible feeling. The views that you get to see at my unit are some of the best views. We've got pilots and crew from all over the country who they agree that I think our unit, maybe in comparison to say like Alaska and maybe like Oregon and whatnot, but we get some of the most incredible views on the West Coast.
Sure. I mean, I got to tell you, if you get a chance to fly to Alaska, it's well worth it.
It's the dream.
Amazing dream, amazing views. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of times where it's hard work and you're tired and you're physically beat. Does this make it all worth it?
It does. So like today I'll be leaving work and I drive about 6 hours to my unit and I'm like, like I've got to do this. And then I check myself and I'm like, wait, I get to do this. Mm-hmm. I'll be on an aircraft in the next 2 days, flying along the ocean with some of my best friends, my crew, like my team. They've become a family. It's one of the best feelings.
So cool.
Past life, interviewing Arnold Schwarzenegger when I was
that's cool.
Media. And then, just all the progression stuff and training. So
Super neat. And which one do you prefer? I mean, I'm sure interviewing Arnold Schwarzenegger is pretty cool, but it's got to be a close second to this.
I think it's going to be that purpose-driven life, right? And when you have that desire to serve at such a capacity, such as the military, or even if you're somebody who's involved in your community who wants to give back, there's that feeling in your heart that you can't replace with anything else when you get to do things like this.
Super cool.
So we have this, if you fly with me, you have to do a handshake before flight. If you're on the right side, you're the pilot, you have to come prepared with a new handshake, and we're going to film it. So
it's just like every crew has these routines, huh?
Yeah, or you try to throw in something that's a little extra that nobody else does. And I try to be like that positive force when I'm flying with my crew. They're all great and positive too. And I just try to come in with just this, like, if it's any type of negativity, I want to squash it, and I want to be like this ray of light if I can. So I may have fallen asleep on that very long flight.
Who would know? You got the visor down, and
that's right. I wasn't crewing. I was off duty. I was taking a break. Nap.
You look at this stuff, and how could you not want to? You got the coolest job. I mean, I ask this to every aviation, crew, pilot, maintainer. But the folks who fly, whatever the position, front, back of the aircraft, doesn't matter. To a woman, to a man, they always say the same thing. So I'm going to ask you this question. Does it ever get old?
No, it's exciting every single time. That amp of adrenaline when you're preparing for a flight, when you're up in the air, when you're with your crew, your team, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I completely believe you, because every single crew, whether they're enlisted officer, senior officer, junior officer, whatever it might be, they always answer the same way. And they answer without any hesitation and real excitement and real enthusiasm. So Heather, thank you so much for joining us. You can find Heather on TikTok, Instagram, we'll post your social media platforms, but hey, never know. Maybe one day we'll come out and fly with you if you'll have us.
I invite you, please. My commander would love it. Come take a flight with us.
I will take a flight with you. I get to choose the handshake, though. That's the only requirement I have.
Absolutely. All yours.
Deal.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.